So before I introduce the panel, come on up, gentlemen, please. Before I introduce the panel, I just wanted to give you an opening comment that is just mapped so perfectly to what we've been talking about last night and today, and that is Ford. So has anybody today heard the news about what's happened to Ford? Raise your hand if you have. That's pretty good, about a quarter of you. So Ford changed out its CEO this morning, okay? So Ford, I mean, here's a $43 billion company that's changed out its CEO away from the family lineage, which is where they've been before, because they realize they need to change their business. They need to transform their business. And they need to modernize their business, is what they were talking about. And they need to do that securely and keep up the path of innovation. So the Ford CEO, the reason that they changed is they wanted to make sure they were keeping up with what was happening and keeping up, outpacing the industry. And since it's a mobile example, as my panelists informed me, it's a good mobile example. And I own a Ford too. How many people in the audience own a Ford automobile? Wow, come on. Well, seriously, I mean, on the Ford side, their technology inside the cars, I mean, it's not a $100,000 car, but I will say my Ford Fusion that I bought 2 years ago, the technology and the electronics in that are the reason I bought that car. When my 16-year-old son helped me think about buying a car and the technology that I wanted, and he sent me to the Ford dealer, and I'm like, come on, you gotta be kidding me, really? And he's like, no, Dad, you gotta check it out. And I did, I took it for a test drive, adaptive cruise control, the sync system. It was just a great, great product. And I will say they have the seed of digital transformation there, and they can do things. The person they appointed to the CEO is somebody that was the former CEO of Steelcase Furniture, the office furniture and supply. He had been there driving, pardon the pun, the autonomous car unit inside the company. So this is somebody who really embraced technology and said, we need to really change this, and that's why they put this gentleman in charge, now of Ford Motor, which I think that's a great honor for him, and also speaks volumes to what Ford really needs to do at the helm. So with that in mind, I'll sit down and we'll talk about what other companies need to do at the helm to do their digital transformation securely. And I've got a list of questions that I'm going to run through the panel on. And before I do that, why don't you give the audience a quick introduction. Brian, I'll start with you, please.
Sure, I'm Brian Duckrain, currently with SkyCure, Mobile Threat Defense. I've been in enterprise IT solutions for quite a while. Ran mobile program at Symantec for a while, and just love the space, love mobile security.
Clint Adams with IBM Mass 360, part of the offering management team. Mass 360 is IBM's leading enterprise mobility management solution, and I've been part of that program for a number of years, 10 plus.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Rob Casto. I'm part of the Checkpoint Sandblast mobile team. I've been in mobile aspects throughout different IT departments, including Qualcomm and Southern California Edison for the last 15 years. So I've kind of immersed myself a little bit into the mobile world.
Okay.
Good morning again, everyone. Kevin Kiley. I am Senior Director over North America for VMware EUC, which is really our AirWatch products. That's our mobile products and our Horizon VDI technologies. Have been here for about almost 7 years now, and I think at the conference every year since its inception or close to it.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. So in Maribel's theme yesterday, we talked about having to reinvent yourselves, the Da Vinci approach of having to reinvent yourselves. And I think a lot of the things in mobility have reinvented themselves, but a piece that has been missing, and something I've been talking to the nGage team and Maribel about, is security. And that's why we have this panel together to talk about when you're talking about digital transformation, whether it's mobile, endpoint, IoT, all the different aspects of your network, all the different layers, how do you implement and how do you go about thinking security? So in that in mind, I've got a list of questions I'm going to run through here real quick, and we'll have everybody on the panel talk about it. And I'll leave some time probably for people in the audience to ask questions as well, if there are some of those. So question one, how are you advising your customers, prospects, and partners to conduct an audit around security and business processes that need to be changed and adopted with respect to digital transformation? What are your top 3 audit suggestions with regards to security and why? So Brian, I'll start with you.
Sure, excellent question. You talked about business processes, and that's actually where I usually recommend starting. Understand what the business process is, and as we've been talking about, a lot of these business processes do lead more towards mobile than they have in the past. But understand what that process is, look at the data. Where does it start? What systems does it go through? Where does it end up? Who's touching it along the way? And understand, what are the risks along the way. So I guess the 3 things would be, first, visibility. Right. Understand what the process is. What are each of the different pieces along the way? Second would be, perform a risk analysis. Understand what the risks for data leakage, for security access along the way. And then I'd say the third thing would be, identify the top things that you can do, the top actions that you can take to mitigate some of those risks. I think there's a million things you can do, and the challenge is identifying those few things that are going to have the biggest impact across all those different elements.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I think even getting a little more specific, sometimes we just have a really straightforward conversation with our customers, and we just ask them, what data is on personal mobile devices, and really, whether it's corporate owned or whether it's BYOD, they're all really personal devices. So what data is on that device? What data lives in SaaS applications that those devices access? And what kind of controls are you implementing to protect that data and control access to that data? So that's one side of the conversation. The other emerging side of the conversation around audit and compliance is really, what are you doing to protect user privacy? What are you doing in the regulatory space? We've all heard about GDPR and all that. So compliance is now a 2-sided coin. You have corporate data to protect. You also have user privacy to protect. So you got to be thinking about both those things. So we kind of have those hard conversations with customers around that. And a lot of times they don't know what data is on personal devices. They don't know how they're protecting it. And they need to really start thinking about this, especially with digital transformation.
Excellent. Clint?
Those are actually all great points and everything, but one of the things I see time and time again as I'm talking to different enterprises, different partners, is the misconception that even a BYOD policy is needed. Coming in, many organizations do not recognize the fact that they need some sort of policy in place. They need to be able to regulate the data that's on these phones. They need to be able to identify the data that's going to be transmitted on these phones or devices. And they don't understand how deep this data goes. They don't understand that the user is connecting to more than just their network. The user is connecting to multiple networks that are oftentimes in areas beyond their control. So the biggest thing I like to do in the audit is try to get a grasp of, okay, what does this company want to do? What do you want to offer? And what do you want to make available to the end users? Once those are identified, then you can take your audit into the deeper steps of adding security to those offerings, adding management to those offerings, and then you can identify where your leakage is, where your challenges may be in securing those devices. But until you actually understand what you want to do as an organization, you're just kind of spinning your wheels.
To use a Ford example, spinning your wheels.
Yep.
Got it. Way to go.
Great tie in there. Yeah, so I'd echo a lot of the sentiments that my colleagues have expressed here today. I think we see a lot of organizations hitting a point today where they're able to maybe review what they've done thus far to mobilize key capabilities, and that there might be an opportunity to now stop and start over with that strategy, or at least do a kind of mini realignment. For many organizations over the last few years, you had tremendous pressure perhaps to mobilize one key application that a BU was asking for, or maybe it was something as simple as getting email out to a device that formerly hadn't been supported. A lot of those were kind of 11th hour efforts where you had to quickly do something and make it work and hopefully make it secure enough. Today, what we advocate a lot with our clients is let's pause and see what we've got. What is it that your users need to be productive? What are those capabilities? And maybe before we go any further, is there a way that we can consolidate some of that into something that's a little more programmatic or systemic across the organization and how you're supporting your users?
Yeah, I think it really gets into, we have people from all different industries here in the audience today, regulated industries, GDPR, if you haven't been familiar with that, that's a really good point about personally identifiable information, PII. Huge problem, right? And keeping that secure, especially in light of the attack surfaces that are possibly out there and exposed by mobile, really important consideration. So that's, again, the reason a lot of you are here today. So Kevin, keeping with you on the end, what are the top 3 personas that people should be thinking about with regards to a secure digital transformation? What are the concerns that maybe these audiences care about and why?
So, as I said, I think in the past, a lot of this was done sort of, I won't say helter-skelter, but there was urgency to get one capability or perhaps app deployed, and a lot of decisions were made quickly to support just that user group. So today in most organizations, you've probably got some capability for your core knowledge workers, perhaps those at the central corporate office, HQ, to get email and maybe a few apps. We are now seeing a lot of interest in how do we go further than that. So other personas, sometimes this can be employees that formerly weren't issued an IT asset. We talked a little bit about this last night. Again, maybe users that, because their job didn't require it, they weren't issued a laptop or a corporate phone, but now they've got this technology in their pocket, and it would enable them to do things differently. This can be environments like retail where, again, I wouldn't want to try to buy an asset for each of those employees, but the fact that they could access HR applications and scheduling apps and other things that they need to do on their own device is great. So how do we support those sort of use cases? The other one that I would point to today that's very important for us, a lot of organizations grappling with how do I support maybe consultants or other folks that are working on maybe a 1099 basis to our company. They're not fully employed. I can't put that device under management, yet I want to serve up a lot of capabilities for them. I trust them to do things with sensitive data. How do I ensure that I'm giving them the right level of access when I don't have full control over that device?
But not going over the line and giving them too much access because they're not really
Absolutely.
full-time employees.
It's got to be very prescriptive.
Where's the line in the sand?
Right. Yeah, so those would probably be the top 2 that we focus on or are seeing a lot of right now, I'll say.
Okay, that's good.
So throughout the years, what we've seen is a tremendous growth in the usage of mobile devices. It started out early on with everybody having their BlackBerry. They're able to, get simple SMS text messages as well as some simple emails, but not much. But the introduction of the more traditional smartphones that have come out, such as the Androids or the iOS devices, have actually increased the usage of these devices. So when we're talking about personnel within your corporations or even who you're making these offerings to, that scope has increased dramatically. It's no longer just your C-levels that need to see their emails immediately and respond. You now have people out in the field that are actually needing to see schematics as they're doing any type of repair work or anything like that. You have nurses or doctors that are out in the field that actually need to get patient records and still have to comply with HIPAA. So we're seeing a much broader scope of people that are actually involved in the mobile world. On top of that, your traditional support teams are now inundated with trying to support a multitude of devices. It's no longer the 1 or 2 devices with 1 or 2 operating systems. They get on the phone, they fix it. They now see multiple devices, multiple operating systems, and multiple use cases that are just traditionally unknown to them. So I think at a bottom line, we're seeing that just the entire growth of a mobile industry right now has placed a burden on all segments within the business. It's not only, just the end user anymore being involved, but it goes beyond the support teams and network teams. Everybody in the organization is now affected.
Yeah, it's also the apps. I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but just to be clear, a lot of the business processes that really people care about in this transformation are the applications. That's the part that touches everybody. and learning how to use those apps properly. If you have problems, where do you get support for those apps? Are the apps secure in of themselves? These are all very important aspects to riff on what you were talking about that I think everybody in the audience needs to think about, because mobile apps, and we've got a number of sponsors here that work on that, that's a big part of what you're going to do in your digital transformation and changing out your business. And if you're a sponsor working with your customers, how are you helping make sure those apps are successful? Because more than 50% of apps that go out there die a very lonesome death. They're like the lone tree, or the Joshua tree, right? The U2 Joshua tree, they're alone. They are by themselves in the desert. We're in the desert, so it's a fitting analogy.
It's a wide open.
Right? It's a fitting one. But they basically sit out there and they're not used, and people are like, why isn't it being used? Well, there's probably, going through this transformation that we're talking about, and that a lot of other people are going to talk about today and tomorrow. These are considerations you need to think about. Clint.
Yeah, I think from personas, I was kind of thinking more in terms of the systems management personas, right? The IT function, security, the desktop management. What we're seeing, in the industry across the board is a unification of endpoint management across all endpoints, whether it's IoT or desktops or laptops or mobile devices. So we're seeing a pretty solid technology move to a unified endpoint management, technology capability. But what we see in a lot of our customer organizations is a lot of dysfunction around endpoint management and who should be managing what endpoints. And it kind of it manifests itself in the app side as well. Yeah. A lot of times the folks that are targeted to do mobile device management end up being the app management guys too. So we see what I'll call a lot of dysfunction in a lot of organizations around capabilities and who should be doing what as far as managing devices. So I think that the point I would like to bring is look at the technology that can help you streamline from an organizational point of view some of the processes, procedures, because it's becoming, the technology can help you streamline those right from, it really shouldn't matter what the device is or even what the app is. A lot of the support processes, the security around those devices and applications can be common and not siloed within your organization.
And that gets into things like identity management.
Exactly.
And, that's an important consideration. I don't have a question about it, but I know that people in the audience care about it. The identity management, the centralizing identity management. Kevin brought it up. It's like, well, the person's a 1099 employee. What kind of identity management do I give them? What kind of permissions do I give them? Really good point. Exact point. Brian?
I'd say the first two that we focus on a lot, mirror a lot of what Kevin was talking about. It's the end user. I mean, that's really the tip of the spear. That's where the data is out and most vulnerable. It's these end users that are out there leading the charge, right? They're out there. They already knew that they have these devices that work great in their personal lives. Why shouldn't I be just as productive when I come to work? Yeah. Right? It used to be, you come to work and now you've got the system that's 3 years old, right? On the older version of Windows and everything, right? So I think they just got tired of that, and they just say, I've got this mobile device. I can manage my schedule. I can get access to everything I need to. I'm going to do the same thing at work, right? So they brought that productivity, and I use the word productivity. Their focus is getting their job done. Right. Their focus isn't securing the data. I mean, it should be, of course, but it isn't, right? So they're looking for, and you bring up apps. They've got apps that do the things that they need to do, yes. Right? How many people that where your users were using Dropbox long before you had a mobile policy, right? That's like probably everybody out there, yeah. Right? So there's apps that do the things that people need to do, and as we're thinking about how to do this properly. We need to say, okay, well, is that the right approach?
Is it a secure approach?
Is it a secure approach? Right? Is it a private approach? Right? Yeah. Right. So is there a third-party app that's already available that is the right thing to use? Yes. Great. Then let's certify that. Let's evaluate it. Make sure there's no data leakage. Make sure there's no security issues, and use it. If not, we've got to build our own, and then that gets in a whole other category. That's right. But the two different scenarios there are. They're very similar. There's the employees and then there's the non-employees, right? the agents, the insurance agents, the doctors, the people that you can't really manage their device, but guess what? They still need to be secured. They still need to have those layers on them that are going to protect, at the app level when they're going across the networks, et cetera. So that all makes sense. I'm going to add in one other persona that hasn't really been mentioned. That's a big focus of what we help our customers with, which is the CISO. Okay. So the CISO, it has a big job, and for a lot of companies, he's behind the curve. Right? He doesn't have, he's had 30 years to build up for the traditional PCs and devices, but there's a big hole when it comes to mobile. And that's a big focus is, can we give him the visibility that he needs to see what's actually going on in those blind spots, to be able to address and mitigate things that are going on that could be potentially bad. And for his success in his role, can he point to these things, and can he show improvement over time to his bosses, the board, et cetera, et cetera? So that would be the one that I think that hasn't been mentioned.
Yeah, and the analytics for that, we did talk earlier about the analytics for security, and I think that's an important consideration. Excellent answers, guys. So question 3 is, what is the top priority with respect to security zones? Everybody's seen the session right up, so I won't reiterate that, but when you look at the security zones, what is the security defined perimeter for the data center, the cloud, app strategies, et cetera. When you look at those zones that are needed for securely allowing applications and people to access those, and it could be IoT as well, right? Don't just think, the persona.
Absolutely.
What are the top priorities with regards to security zones? It's a hard question, and it can be answered a lot of different ways, so I'll start with you. It's a tough question.
You bring up a lot of points, like the endpoint, the network, the perimeter, like all these different things. And I think, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but I think it comes back to mobile as where a lot of the focus needs to be talked about right now, because mobile in kind of a unique way touches every single one of those things. And in a way that makes the problem bigger than what we've seen with traditional devices. They're on all the time.
Right.
One of our customers actually referred to the mobile device as the #1 top best surveillance device ever created, because it's always on. It's always on the person.
I don't know what you mean. Here.
So it's always on. It's connecting outside of the perimeter on tons of unsecured networks.
Right.
You've got all sorts of people using it, and they're using it for everything. All of the important data of your company is going through that device.
Yeah.
Or the device has access to it, which is just as bad.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's
a conduit.
It's
not a one-way conduit either.
It's the conduit. So I think you can't do anything 100%, but if you could focus on the device, on that mobile device, have it be self-aware and self-protecting, then I think that tends to address a lot of the other potential gaps.
Yeah, I think it also, and people who know me have heard me use this graphic or seen me use this graphic. It's the OSI stack, layer 8, the user, right? Think about the user. It has to have a user awareness to this. And yes, we can do as much as we can do with security and technology and this whole transformation, but education, knowledge is dangerous. So basically, make sure people understand. Right. Hey, we've given you this app, we've given you these permissions, we've given you, this virtual interface to the data. Your responsibility is blah. And
but
so
you have to give them the right
training.
apps.
Well, you have to give them the training to do it too.
Yeah.
So training can be expensive. So I digress.
Yeah.
Clint.
Yeah, in the new world where the perimeter is essentially dead, where data lives almost anywhere, SaaS apps, mobile devices, all over the place. Identity is the key now. So I think folks are finally starting to realize that identity becomes the core element of controlling access to resources wherever they lie, wherever the data resides. And the technology is also available to get very granular and to provide tools like step-up authentication and certificates and identity-based controls and single sign-on to keep the user experience reasonable, even though you're doing very tight control in the background. So we see identity playing a larger and larger role across the security domain, and we've been focusing a lot on that lately. So we do promote the use of identity systems, and have a, when we're talking to customers, we really want them to have a hard look at their current identity access control systems and leverage the capabilities that they have into their mobile deployments.
And make sure they're modernized, right? We talked about the WannaCry debacle with WinXP, and Microsoft's been all over the NSA about weaponizing it. Well, there are identity managers out there that are kind of legacy identity managers that are not using modern technology.
Right.
So when you do your digital transformation, it's like, okay, I've got the weakest chink in the armor, and that is the weakest chink in the armor with regards to security. And I think identity management, identity access control.
The good news is you don't have to blow it up and start over.
Right.
Because there's a lot of ways that you can augment a current identity.
That's right.
Identity management system
right.
to bring those.
It doesn't need to be a
capabilities
forklift upgrade. You're right. You're absolutely right. Bob?
Build it. Bottom line, I think where the crisis lies in today's mobile world and always connected, going back to your conversation
And
earlier.
Intel, IoT, I mean, that's always connected too. I mean, all these different endpoints, which aren't people, they have applications. So
Exactly. So we are seeing a new paradigm where we're not looking at, the typical PC usage where a user flips the lid open, opens it up, and does what they need to do, shuts it down, and they're out of there. So in the old world, we were looking at, infected files being traditionally the biggest issue we had to face as a security company. Now we're looking at malicious applications that are actually being transmitted to these devices in a number of ways. We're not looking at the traditional App Store downloads or Play Store downloads, but we're actually looking at malicious attacks coming from the network segment.
Yeah.
Man-in-the-middle attacks that are coming from a user that plugs into Starbucks or to McDonald's or wherever. Little Billy Bob that's sitting in the back of the room with a pineapple device, imitating the SSID of whatever network these people are trying to get on and trapping all of their data. The spectrum is now huge. It's no longer something that we can just put blinders on and focus exactly on what we want to look for. Now we have to look for everything. So we go back to the user education. The users now need to be aware of what they're connecting to, what applications they're downloading, the SMS text messages that they're getting that may have, links out to, malicious sites, Trojans that can be dropped on the device via man-in-the-middle or even an SMS text message that can then be shared with your network. So the paradigm that we're in today is unequaled in the history of PC computing, in my opinion. It's now wide open. We're back to that old Wild Wild West days, and every one of your users with a connected device is a potential target.
Yeah, it actually, before we go to Kevin, it actually gets into the whole business process, right? The applications are just the front end, user interface, user experience for the business process that you're trying to get people to leverage on a mobile device, on a laptop, wherever they are, right? So if you can make sure that business process is secure, then that's great. That's essentially what you're trying to do. Yeah. But if you can't, and you're doing financial transactions, for example, then you get into electronic currency, then you get into the whole blockchain issue. And people need to be thinking about that when they're thinking about secure digital transformation, because it isn't just, secure, digital transformation, we're giving you a mobile device. No, that's not it, right? No. Oh, okay, we're giving you an app. Nope, that's not it. We're having you use this business process. Nope, still not it. Oh, you're doing business transactions? How are you doing those? Well, we're using the secure currency. It's not necessarily Bitcoin, but you get what I'm saying. Blockchain, if you're not familiar with that, and you're doing any kind of secure financial transactions over the network or the business process, you need to become familiar with blockchain as a technology. Very important to do that securely. So, Kevin, with that, I'll pass it to you.
All good points. And I guess coming back to the perimeter point, I think from our view, we don't see really any hard perimeters anymore. You have to accept the fact that all of this has become very gray. Your users are going to need access to these systems wherever, on whatever device at some level. And how do you serve that up? There's a lot of very dark and sinister concerns here, and those are valid as well. But there's some great opportunities, I think, to make it happen. And we'd point to the fact that as you look at the capabilities of that device, it is the ultimate surveillance tool. But by the same token, it's got the ability to report back things that can help inform security and give you a more detailed picture of who that user is. We've now got biometrics built in. We've got location capabilities. We've got simple things as what apps are they trying to use. Leveraging machine learning as part of this picture to really inform a sort of contextual security score, so that I can say, I see this user routinely does these things. They have authenticated via biometrics. They're connecting from a place that we would normally see them connecting from. All of this looks very nominal, and we allow that maybe to happen. So that perimeter can shift based on any number of these factors, and really using, again, a much more sophisticated picture of what looks like proper authentication that can constantly be moving.
And it gets to the chart that Maribel showed at the beginning of the session last night. If you didn't see it, it's the whole Da Vinci approach to life, and basically having that skill set and learning the different aspects of how your users and how your customers and how your partners are using technology, how they're using apps, how they're using processes, how they're using them securely is an important part of what you need to be able to arm and aim your customers, your partners, all the different audiences you work with. Very important distinction. So you bring up a good point. So I've got 2 more questions. I've got about 8 minutes left in the session. I'll allow people definitely to ask questions if you have them now. Phil, I know you're in the corner over there. Do people have questions now, or should I go on? Oh, we got one question in the back, Phil. Sorry to make you move, man. You look like a jet there in the background.
So, end of the day, it's all about the people. We can spend millions or even billions on the technologies, but if people are not our side, the benefits will be always suboptimal. So what are your thoughts on people transformation to enable successful enterprise digital transformation, and how you are doing in your organizations?
Gentlemen, one of you want to take that first?
I'm not quite sure I understood the question.
Can you try rephrasing? I'm sorry, just, and also state where you're from, please.
So this is Sanjeev Kapoor from Ford Motor Company.
Okay. Sorry. I guess my car won't start when I come back from the airport, huh? That'll teach me. Keep going, Sanjeev. I'm sorry.
So I was expecting a discussion on people transformation that plays a role in successful enterprise digital transformation.
Got it.
So my question is regarding that. Your thoughts on needs to enable people to transform people to enable successful enterprise digital transformation.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that, and how you are enabling it in your organizations.
Yeah, that's in our customers' organizations too. I mean, to your point, it's not just our own, but our customers. That's a great question. So I'll start it and then I'll pass it on. So I think a lot of it comes down to, Sanjeev, to training. You have to be able to reach out all kinds of channels to the people that you're working with in your organization, right? They're using their mobile devices every day. Great, one channel. They're coming into work every day during the week. Another channel. They're going down to lunch every day, another channel. So you have to think about the different touch points of how you're educating your workforce, and then give them the plan on what you're doing. So just like any good presentation, tell them what you're going to tell them how, then show them step by step, and then as you go through like a report card, tell them what you have done over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So a lot of it comes down to what people miss, and that is communication. Right, I've just finished a coaching season for my twin boy, 11-year-old boy's soccer team. And I would be the coach yelling at them on the sideline, communicate, talk to each other. And they're like looking at me like, what's he talking about? What do we have to talk about? It's like, pass the ball, know where your teammate's gonna be, talk about a defender, talk about a offender. There's things that need to happen, and communication is something that is needed for all the different people, not just the implementers, right, the application people, not just the security people, not just the end users, all of them. And you need to get them all, part of the sports analogy, on the same playing field if you're going to have any hope of that communication working between those 3 audiences. So I've taken up enough time there when we get to the more important guys. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll just say,
yeah, go ahead.
I think communication is key. It's almost cliche to talk about it at this point, but millennials are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the workforce, and they do bring a different set of expectations to work. I think this has been widely discussed. How do you meet them where they want to work and really deliver the right experience to enable that transformation? To bring it back to your question, mobility is going to be a big part of that. That is one of the core expectations. I think serving up the capabilities, communicating what it means for them, what it's going to allow, communication is really central to all this. And of course, that ties back to yet another topic that was brought up earlier. I think Clint mentioned the privacy aspects is something that you've really got to nurture along this wave. I'm going to enable you to work anywhere, anytime, and hope that you are productive at those hours. There's got to be some also expectation around what does that mean for your privacy. This device is very important to the way you work. You've got your kids' pictures on it. Every bit of your personal life is there as well. And GDPR, which is part of this, is we're only about 51 weeks away from that going into law. There are massive fines out there for your companies if you don't get your Privacy Act together. So this is something you have to do, but it's also going to help with this transformation that many of your organizations are probably trying to undertake right now.
Yeah, and communication is key to PII and GDPR, for sure. If you're not familiar with it, definitely something to get familiar with regards to your applications, technology, et cetera.
And I think it all starts with a policy, though. You do not have a policy in place.
Yeah, tell them what you're going to tell them. Put that policy out
It's
there.
gotta be out
Like I
there.
said, all different ways. You got to get it out there on the mobile device, when they come into the office, in the lunchroom, the chat boards, Slack, whatever you're using, get that out there, and don't put it just on one channel, because just like cable TV, there's like 300 channels out there. I wasn't watching channel 82. I don't know what the hell is on channel 82. So put
Exactly,
it on all
but
the
that
channels.
policy has to also benefit the end user.
Yes,
Okay, so
that's right.
what a lot of companies
Contextual.
don't understand
Contextual.
is a lot of their end users look at mobile management, mobile security as Big Brother.
Right.
I'm looking over your shoulder, I know exactly what you're doing. What they don't realize, though, is the first time their device gets infected, all of their banking apps that they've been using, all their investment apps, all of their personal applications, such as their Facebook and everything, has now been exfiltrated as well.
Yeah, so your point is make sure it has context to the user.
Right.
And the process and whatever the audience is,
And
the
they're
persona.
part of the process then.
Yeah,
They're not just an outsider being forced to do something.
yeah. Gentlemen, we have like 10 seconds left, 5 seconds each. Ready, go. Okay, thanks.
Just on IBM's going through a huge transformation right now, internally. If you've been reading the press, there's press about changing work style, and we're using Slack.
Yeah.
IBM's embraced design teams. So from a digital transformation perspective, as a user, I'm experiencing it, so I can relate that, and it's pretty significant, the things that IBM's doing in their journey to digital transformation. If you want to, it's interesting just to follow the news of what IBM's been up to in that space. So they need to change. They are changing. It's a big company, but it's interesting to watch. So I would call to that as an example of digital transformation, and I'm a user of that. I don't influence it too much, but
Right.
I'm a user of it.
But to the question we had before, a good example, right? I'm the user, I'm being influenced by this. This is how my company is doing this. Last point.
To wrap up, yeah, I think to reiterate educating the user, we definitely find in the conversations that we have that helping the users understand the implications of what they do, like when that little note pops up, mail.google.com cannot be, do you want to continue, right?
Yeah.
Well, your users are all clicking continue.
Of course
right?
they
We
are.
know better, but
I want to continue.
Right? So education is huge.
Who cares
And
if
so
it's
I
on
don't-
secure server?
So I don't really, so I don't really need to reiterate that. But I think the other half of it that often is ignored is you still need to give them the right tools. Because as educated as they are, if you don't give them the right tools that are easy enough to use, that are to be productive, they're gonna go around you.
Yeah. I fish a lot, so it's like water going on a rock around a
Yeah.
stream. Water's going to find a way. So
Yep.
I apologize. I think we're out of time. Paul, do we have any other questions? No? No time? Oh, we do have one more question. Do we have time for one
Yeah,
more?
one question.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you, Phil.
We'll have two, all right.
So a comment that I wanted to make, since we're talking about end user computing and security and mobility, You know, I think we can end this on an optimistic note, thinking about these mobile devices that were designed within the last decade. So we have the sandbox applications, the secure inter-process communications. They get updated quickly and frequently. Even Android devices, now that most of the devices are getting patches at least.
Without any user knowledge of them oftentimes, right?
Exactly, and even all of these features coming into Windows 10 becoming more like a mobile device.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of course we want to maybe in some situations verify those devices, but there's maybe if you can say we're putting more trust in the inherent state of these devices, these mobile devices, than we ever would have laptop or desktop.
In the on-prem world, for sure. I mean, your point on updating to the cloud, you're right. There's a lot more trust that's being placed in, you know, these subscriptions, these software as a service devices, software as a service applications, processes, to your point. All of them are being updated, you know, invisibly, right? The invisible updates that the user just gets the functionality, and do they all of a sudden, voila, know how to use that functionality? Not necessarily. I mean, that's one of your points, right? Is it secure? I would hope so, but that's kind of bespoke on the company that's supplying the updates. So there's a lot more trusting of the vendors going to the end user than there ever was before. That's definitely a dramatic shift that's happened with this generation of computing. That's a really good point.
Yep.
So,
Holly.
Melanie Seekins here from Altria. You guys are using some terminology that maybe not everybody is real familiar with. If you could elaborate on what GDPR and what that really means for the rest of us.
Yeah, GDPR is the global data protection regulations that originate in Europe. So if you have heard about safe harbor or some of the privacy regulations across the EU, they're reworking those, and it's going to become much more difficult for US-based companies to operate in Europe around the privacy. And they're related to the privacy, end user privacy. Really not data security, it's end user privacy. What are you allowed to do as an entity, as a business entity?
And what are the implications? If you release personal information, then there are set fines, Melanie. There's a lot of set fines, very heavy fines that are enforceable with GDPR.
There's an obligation to understand them and adhere to them.
And an obligation to prove that you're adhering,
Yes,
and
right.
et cetera, et
Compliance.
cetera.
It starts with a fundamental belief that privacy is a right that you as an individual have. And if you're going to give any of your data to a company that you work with, that you work for, that you buy from, that they have obligations in how they protect it, what they do with that data, how they process it, et cetera. Very, very detailed regulations around how they're going to manage all these things. And it might be easy to think, well, we're not a European company. My company's based in the States. It doesn't matter. If you do business in Europe, it matters.
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's
You're all in if you're doing business in Europe.
yeah, there's almost a stronger argument to say that a lot of European regulators probably view American companies as being somewhat cavalier with privacy.
Yep.
So they may be the first ones that get prosecutions. So even a similar example, although it's not GDPR, Facebook. What was the fine that was just passed out this week? $1.2 billion, something massive.
Yeah.
So watch for this to happen. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it. If you're not familiar with it already, do some reading, because it is something that will impact your organization.
And you'll have to vet your SaaS vendors as well, right? So anybody that you do business with, that has a presence in Europe. So there's a lot of implications.
The regulation's kicking next May, so we've got a lot of companies that are trying to get that solved now to be ahead of that, because the fines start in May in 2018.
Yeah. With that, I'll say thank you to my panel. Give them a hand. I really appreciate it, guys.